So, good evening, sir. We are really grateful to have you here with us. So, I'll tell you a little bit about our magazine, Evolve. This is the Ferguson College Psychology Department's magazine, which we started last year, and we published our very first issue this year. And currently, we are working on our second issue. And the theme for this year that we have chosen is well-being. So the reason why we started this magazine is firstly we noticed की आम्ही जे काही कॉलेजमध्ये शिकतोय and what we are going to be working आम्ही जे काम करणार आहे त्यात थोडंसं काहीतरी गॅप आहे. So we want to try to bridge that gap. And more importantly आमचा सेकंड रिझन हा होता की आम्ही हे नोटीस केलं की इवन सायकोलॉजी स्टुडंट्समध्ये अजूनपर्यंत देर इज hesitance regarding this topic of mental health, and even they feel hesitant to seek support, to talk to people, to seek help. So we want to try to form a community and build a platform that will help these students to speak out and seek help. So again, we welcome you, and you're the first person that we are going to be interviewing in this series, in which every issue we interview one illustrious personality like you. Now, you need no introduction. In your career spanning almost 40 years, you have established Muktangan De-Addiction Center, IPH, as we all know, and you have authored various books, plays, movies, and so much more. So we want to know what has inspired you to get into this field of psychology and psychiatry.
Actually, I came in the field of psychiatry, not psychology, because I'm a medical graduate. So while I was in the medical training at St. GS Medical College and KM Hospital in Mumbai, I came across a book written by Ivan Illich, which was titled as Medical Nemesis. And this was when I was in second MBBS. And this book talks about a model of medicine which is based only on biological processes, and a model which is called holistic or biopsychosocial model. And I was very raw and young even as a medical student. And that is why I was very impressed with that book. And I was told by a publication house to translate it into Marathi. So Granthali is a publication house. And then I thought that I would Indianize this book rather than translating it. And this was published when I was an intern. But by that time, I had studied quite deeply the two competing models of medicine. One is biomedical and second is biopsychosocial. So this was one aspect of taking, influencing me towards the mental health aspect or the psychiatry aspect. Influence of my mentors also had a lot to do with it. And when I decided to take psychiatry as a postgraduate career in 1980, so almost 43 years back, so that was full of challenges. Even my mother was not very much for of it because stigma is around all the time. And my maternal uncle, my mama, was suffering from a chronic ailment, schizophrenia. He was in mental hospital. And there was this belief that if you have a family history and if you stay in contact with lunatic people, then you will also catch up with a mental illness. So that was a real anxiety with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother tried every way to disinfluence me from mental health. But finally, my will prevailed. In fact, that seems to be the first independent decision that I took in my life. So that is how I came to psychiatry, or the clinical psychiatry part of it. I had also on the way discovered through my writing of plays and through my activities in the field of writing that this is something that I am interested in also, the emotional part of life, the scripts that people live, the stories that people carve out. So I think all this cumulatively led me to this career.
Okay, so as you also mentioned, ki even before there was a lot of stigma about mental illness in general, and even right now, like I also mentioned before, there is still stigma about mental health getting support. So there is still some progress that has happened in the recent years. So what else can be done to improve access to mental health care and support?
I think access is only one aspect of stigma, and only making access is not going to help. The services also need to be very competent, because if you have access and you do not have competent services, then you are increasing stigma. So, and that is something that everybody overlooks conveniently.
Mm.
That is why the level of training, the competency of professionals, their links with culture and society, all these things are very important. It's not only access, because what will happen is if you have access but no competency, you are deepening the stigma. That is one part. The second aspect of this whole issue is that we need to take mental health to every strata of society. And what is very important is that the concept of mental health is not equal to mental disorders. When people talk about mental health, they actually talk about mental disorders.
Mm.
So that is only one tier or one level of mental health.
Mm.
Distress is as important as disorder, which everybody faces and also requires, if not treatment, some kind of mental health help. And development also requires help from the mental health professionals. And what is very important is that even the development part is overlooked. What can be said as one of the unique features of our work of last 33 years at IPH is that we have focused on health to a very great extent. And if positively mental health can contribute towards the excellence in the society. For example, we have worked with athletes, we have close to 20 internationals who represent our country. So that is contribution of mental health to that sector. We have worked with commandos, given mental health inputs to these kind of elite paramilitary forces, contribution of mental health. We have worked with corporates and really contributed towards increasing the productivity of our country in a way by helping all these corporates. So again, this is mental health contribution to development. What is very important is that this is not realized that mental health can contribute. And to contribute, mental health has to raise to that kind of a competency, efficacy. So that is one aspect. And the second aspect is reaching the society and the different layers of society. So if you look at most of our initiatives, they cover the areas of all age groups. We are not only working with metropolitan middle class or higher middle class areas, but we are working in Meghat, in Dang with the Adivasis. We are working in a project to the slum with the slum dwellers in the metropolitan area of Mumbai. So we have been working with almost all strata of society, all age groups of society, and that is why we have a large group in Thane, Pune, Nasik. We have close to 300 people in the group. So we work across almost 150 verticals of mental health. Why that is important? Because unless that happens, the stigma will not get lessened.
Right. So across these different stratas that you mentioned, not just socioeconomic, but also age-wise. So what are some of the differences in the problems that you notice that these people from the different strata face?
Oh, on one of on one of the levels we can talk for an hour. See, the point is that isn't it very natural that different people with different backgrounds will feel different problems?
So our next question is that तुमचा इंडियन फिलॉसॉफी अँड सायकोलॉजी ह्या दोन्ही विषयांवरती बराच अभ्यास आहे. सो हाऊ डू these two fields intersect particularly on what we can learn about maintaining well-being?
That is a very pertinent question. See, the point is the very definition of well-being in terms of psychology and the definition of well-being in terms of spirituality, they have the same starting point, but not the same progress or the journey further. So that we need to understand, because all spiritual quests will always start with sound mental health or sound emotional health. And that is where the mental health aspect and the spiritual aspect, take Buddha, take Advaita Vedanta, all these people will definitely talk about the healthy activities of emotions and thoughts. They will talk about rationality, irrationality, because everybody starts there. Now, then the journey goes on from one aspect to the other aspect. So, if you, and I'm talking here about the religions or the philosophies that came from our Indian soil. So, when you talk about all these philosophies, then their own definitions of self-development and well-being then go on expanding. So, we need to understand that mental health is a common, can be one of the common starting points. If you want to study philosophy, to study spirituality, want to study religions, that is one aspect. The second aspect is that then you will have some differences, where the schools may differ, right? So even within the Hindu philosophies, there will be Bhakti school, there will be Advait Vedanta, but everywhere the baseline is the same. And that is what that baseline is. From your own restricted me, you need to transcend to a definition of me which is more expansive and more inclusive. So that is what Buddha says, that is what Advait Vedanta says, that is what Bhakti says, that's what every Oriental school says. So what is very important is that if you have a philosophical base added to psychology, then you can, number one, you can resonate with the cultural ethos. Number two, you know then the connection between the tradition and the modern sciences. Number three, you can make your therapy or developmental approaches culturally aligned with the reality that is around you. So these are many examples of why the philosophical part, when it gets integrated with psychology, it would be of help. Take example of something like Yoga Shastra or something like Vipassana or mindfulness. If you have a philosophical base as well as a psychological training, it becomes less difficult to understand and practice these things, even in personal life. And as teachers or as people who will work professionally, therapists in these fields.
Okay, I'll ask the last question now. What advice would you give to students interested in pursuing a career in mental health and psychology?
Firstly, they should decide where they are going to practice from, which part of the globe, because they have that choice and liberty. So they can practice from whichever country and society that they can choose. They should be very clear about it, because what is very important is people would say that I will do my graduation here, post-graduation there, post-graduation here, then go out. So you need to understand and choose your education according to where you want to really work and practice, right? If you want to practice in an Indian metropolitan city, you will have a different learning curve, and you should even search for institutes in a different way. If you want to go in Indian tribal or rural society, your learning curve has to be different. If you want to go and settle in the USA, your curve has to be different. If you want to settle in UK or Europe, your curve has to be different. If you would go in Gulf countries, your curve has to be different. So that is one aspect which is important. The second is which specialty you will choose. So clinical, counseling, industrial, educational, social, and how you are going to apply it. Hmm. So I think these are the questions which are very, very important for people. And the second point is that most of the teachings that we receive, the theoretical part of it in undergraduate and in postgraduate studies, how are you going to add practical aspects to it? How are you going to add your self-study aspects to it? Are you going to be a part of a organization, group which is working for mental health? When we say mental health, you will require exposure of reading, of listening, of seeing, observing, so many things, even the audio visual arts. So you can choose even those exposures, something that you will integrate with your core domain. So one needs to be absorbent and one needs to be an explorer of many things rather than making it restricted to a classroom exam oriented search.
Right. Okay, then those were all our questions.
Thank you.